This is It Matters, the show that digs beneath the surface of our political landscape, pop culture, and the 2024 election. I'm your host, Michael Starr Hopkins. I'm a born and bred Washingtonian who knows the ins and outs of DC. I've worked with political heavyweights from presidents to governors and members of Congress. I also write for and appear on The Hill, The Daily Beast, MSNBC, and News Nation. Now I'm bringing you prominent politicians and cultural icons, and the unfiltered truth. So buckle up and join me as we navigate this crazy world together and look at the situations that matter the most. This is It Matters. Let's dive in. All right, today we've got Rachel Bitecofer. Rachel's the author of Hit 'em Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. I've got to say, it is one of the best political books I have read in the last couple years. For people who have listened to the show, you guys know how much I criticize Democrats about needing to punch back and punch harder. And Rachel's book is the blueprint on how to do that. Rachel, how are you?
Dude, I'm doing here, about 5.5 months from the end of, American democracy. So as good as one can do,
I mean, you predicted the blue wave in 2018. You saw kind of what was going to happen in 2020 and 2022. How are you feeling? Because I know I wake up with a cold sweat every night.
I mean, the stakes make that unavoidable, guys. All right. So let me tell you, here's the thing is I don't sell hopium and I don't sell doom, right? So but I deal in lead. I deal in data. Okay.
The real stuff.
And what made me, I just want to take a step back so people kind of get a sense of who I am and what I'm bringing to the table. So the reason I was a good forecaster and analyst is because I'm a trained PhD credentialed political scientist who studied political behavior in campaigns and elections academically, okay, which is a very different perspective than the practitioner perspective, okay? Mm-hmm. And why I even got into forecasting was my frustration that Nate Silver and Wasserman and, the big named analyst Cohen didn't seem to understand political behavior, especially the role of partisanship and especially the role of partisanship in a polarizing environment. So really they weren't accounting for polarization at all, right? Yeah. And so that's what made me look like a genius. And I'll tell you why. It kind of skips forward to the book a little bit, but the front half of the book is about convincing people why they need to make the strategic shift that I'm arguing for. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it does so by proving some basic points of the electorate. The first is that since 1957, we have known, poli-sci has known this horrible basic truth about the American voter. It knows nothing. It's like Jon Snow, okay? It knows nothing. It's all the president and their partisanship, and that's why party is so important in our elections. It was always important. It was always the most reliable predictor of who somebody would vote for, even for most so-called independents. So we have, 33 or 35% of a survey sample that says they're independent. Well, smart pollsters know now, sort out the leaners, those who say I lean Republican, I lean Democrat, and put them into the party camps because there's no fucking difference. There's no difference, right? And so, it is always true that partisanship was going to be the major explanation to explain the variance of vote choice. But in the polarized era, that has ticked up and up and up. And we're talking about since 2004 for the polarized era of American politics, okay? Mm-hmm. And now, I don't need to know anything about you. You could be a black dot, okay? I don't know if you're man. All this demo shit that you hear analysts focus on or even consultants and campaigns focus on, right? The reason why political science is interested in the demos is the demos predict party and then party predicts vote choice perfectly, okay? so the be-all, end-all isn't the demographics, it's the partisanship of the electorate, right? And I end up looking like a genius, but here's the truth of the matter is when you use that methodology, you have eliminated 90% of the uncertainty of who someone's going to vote for, okay?
Is there any uncertainty anymore? People keep talking about these mystery voters who were Obama voters twice and then Trump voters. And there's this idea among Democrats that somehow we're going to win back these unicorn voters. You talk about this a lot in your book.
I do want to talk about that because when I said the polarized era comes in 2004, what political behaviorists who have studied this institutionally and long term and systematically can bring to the table is the acknowledgement and the realization that actually the two party coalitions are always under flux. Okay. But the most recent realignment, de-alignment started when the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act were passed in the 60s in the South. Okay. Up until that point, you had a Democratic Party that had a liberal and a conservative Southern wing. That conservative Southern wing quit the party over segregation, and you see the party start to change. And if I was a political scientist in 1980, like Alan Keyes, I would have been like, oh, we're going to see two-party competition in the South. And we did for like a cycle or two, right? But it just kept going. And now the South is still full of white conservatives. In 1960, they were all registered Democrats. Now they're all registered Republicans, okay? And some of the de-alignment that we're seeing is like kind of what I call the nationalization of the Southern strategy, okay? Because they first did it down there. Then they started chasing white working class voters. And what they were doing is what my book argues is brand loyalty, right? So they started wedging those voters away from us using culture war, grievance politics, wedge campaigns, okay? And what the goal was is, okay, you've got your union worker in Pennsylvania. Economically, they are, should be highly motivated to support unions, and in order to support unions, support Democrats, right? But in that voters' world, there's nobody telling them about that there's a relationship between Republicans and union busting. So there's that. But also it is wedging away like brand allegiance by getting them to see us as a threat to themselves, to their own lifestyle. It's a loss aversion effect, okay? As you pointed out, you have Obama to Trump voters. But don't forget, folks, you have Romney to Obama voters, or more so, who ran against Romney, Romney voters that ended up voting for Hillary Clinton. Okay. And we have never tapped into that very effectively. Donald Trump and the MAGA takeover of the Republican Party, the radicalization of the Republican Party, because again, we can't have blinders as to the situation we face. 40 million people who either are Republicans or lean with them will tell you with a straight face 4 or 5 just absolutely untrue reality basis things. Joe Biden stole the election. Joe Biden is a pedophile. COVID vaccines kill people, but COVID was a hoax, right? Like we are really talking about like a mass psychosis event, right? And, we've never gone in there to the, suburban is the first de-alignment to us. Like that's where that college educated vote has come to us since 2017 is really when it started. Okay. When that realignment, that education realignment started to pick up speed, but we've never really purposely tapped into. We've never gone to the suburban Republicans and the right-leaning independents in suburbia who are college educated and ex-urban voters and showed them that MAGA extremism is coming for them, coming for their freedom, coming for their social security, what have you, right? So getting folks to understand like some of that isn't so much a swing. There are some pure voters in the middle that do that. They swing and it's very top level narrative. And that's why being the incumbent is almost always bad in that pool because they always like change and they don't follow news and politics. So they're always dissatisfied with whoever's in charge, right? That is a distinct universe, but within people who have moved from one camp to the other in that realignment process, we have so much untapped potential there. And then, of course, we could be blunting where their realignment is focused on now is in non-white voters because they've kind of tapped out, right? Like they've wedged white, non-college educated men pretty much to the limits. And now they're exploding that, but they have figured out, because again, when somebody comes up with a good idea in the Republican Party, it's funded and deployed, okay?
Yeah, imagine that.
They figured out that they could go after Latinos on socialism and gender shit and get them to stop voting for Democrats. So I really hope that people who are listening to this pod will read the book so that you will understand why we need to make the change, and that the change that I'm arguing about is not in the branches of a tree. Okay, it is the roots. I'm saying you have to root and branch our whole strategy because it's based on a flawed assumption. And that assumption is that the electorate is informed and engaged. It is neither of those things. Okay? Republicans get that. We do not. And if we don't get it by the fall, we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, one of the great myths that I hear from Republicans, and I rarely hear Democrats really punching back on, is that Democrats are the original racists. That when you look back at history, it was the Democrats who were the segregationists, while failing to acknowledge that after the civil rights legislation was signed into act, like you said, it was now the Republicans, it was the Southern conservatives who left the Democratic Party.
People.
Yeah. Right. Why haven't Democrats been better at framing a lot of these historic messages?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like, right? So if you take what I'm telling you at face value, which you should, because it's in data, and I don't overload the book in data, okay?
Yeah.
I could have written an entire academic book, like really nailing the coffin that voters don't know shit, okay? But I didn't do that. So if you accept what I am telling you, that voters do not read or watch any news. They do not know. They know there was an insurrection thing at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. Maybe they've heard it was a peaceful protest or, a tour. Okay. And they know that. They don't know that that was part of a coup plot. They don't know anything about fake electors. They don't know anything about the DOJ being asked to put out a fake letter about election fraud. They don't know any of these things, right? So here's the problem about historical education. Like, yes, we should be doing that, and outside of like the actual cycle and the swing races, right? That's a work that has to happen. But when
it's an investment.
When we go into one of these swing races, let's say it's Florida Senate, right? Like what I would want the Debbie Powell-Marcel campaign to understand is that it is extremely difficult to tell your constituents, to tell your potential voter pool in Florida, just the ones that would, you want to target, which is the independents down to the Democrats, right? To tell those people one thing will cost $100 million, okay? Because they're not reading the news. They don't know the information that you know. They don't have the interest. And I talk about how much of it is fired by interest. I'm interested in politics, so I know a shit ton about it.
Yeah.
I am not interested in opera. I cannot tell you the name of one contemporary opera singer, okay? Not one, because I've never read about it. I don't read about it. I don't watch about it. I don't like it. I don't care. That is how average people feel about politics. So, what we are always like focused on is, we need to tell them this, we need to tell them that, we need to tell them this. And there are so many things, right? Mm-hmm. But what my point is, no, it's going to be very hard to tell a prospective voter just one thing. And if you want that one thing to even get through, you have to have a sniper strategy. It has to be like CRT in Virginia. The only fucking thing you talk about over and over and over. And what I want people to do is to realize that what we're trying to do is ass backwards, okay? Where we're focused on representing our coalition through our political messaging, especially our campaign-centric political messaging, right? And I'm like, no. Glenn Youngkin didn't give two shits about public education, okay? He didn't, let alone race in school, right? He didn't give two shits about it. If Glenn Youngkin was our candidate, Glenn Youngkin would have structured his whole strategy and message around Glenn Youngkin's strength, which is businessman Glenn. Okay, It's been all about economics and this and that. Somebody like me on the other side, because on the other side they listen to people like me, sat down and said, "Look, Glenn, like I know you care about business tax code, but we're going to run on race and education, and we're going to wedge the hell out of it, right?" And they got every candidate on that one message, and they took something that had literally I had never heard of 10 months prior to Election Day and made it the number one issue, right? And that's because they understand you are setting the narrative. You are framing public opinion, right? The way that Republicans use polling is very different. We're using polling to be like, what are voters into? And maybe we can talk about that. No, Republicans are making voters respond to what they know is the best thing for them to be focused on to win. Right? So instead of focusing on representation through messaging and electioneering, folks, why don't we win office on the thing that we know Republicans do not want to talk about? And I'm guessing, Michael, you can tell me, because I'm going to ask you, I do this to my audiences too. What is the one topic that Republicans definitely don't want to talk about in 2024?
I'm going to go with abortion.
There you go, friend, okay? Yeah. That's the one damn thing they don't want to talk about. So we should be hammering them on freedom, limited government. They've padded the pile for us on big government and limited government overreach. So
Yeah.
we can talk right into that frame and freak people out in the burbs and the ex-urban voters about Republicans coming for them with a national abortion ban.
Yeah, and it's not just a national abortion ban. I mean, they're talking about limiting access to contraception, limiting access to IVF, and the distraction that is the Trump ecosystem is Democrats aren't good at walking and chewing gum at the same time. So the ability right now of Democrats to hit Republicans on abortion while also focusing on hitting Donald Trump on the fact that he is corrupt and fucking morally bankrupt doesn't seem to be happening. What is it that, I mean, the obvious question is, what is it that Democrats should do? But we know they should walk and chew gum at the same time. What is it about messaging around abortion that Democrats haven't tapped into yet? Like, is there still more room to grow in polling?
Oh, God, yes. Dude, there's millions of women right now living in these red states that have no idea abortion's been banned. Okay?
How?
And then
I know you say they're not informed.
I know. So, like, that's why, like, when I wrote the book, I knew I had to lay out the why in that front half, okay? But I thought, like, people would be able to internalize it. And I'm not judging you because, Michael, you're no different than anybody else,
Absolutely.
right? Like, you've read the book, you've listened to me for a few minutes. I've reminded you about how people don't pay attention to the news, but we can't quite make that next step to internalize what that means, right? And so because you're shocked when I tell you millions of women have no idea that abortion's been banned, let alone to be able to make the connection Republican Donald Trump abortion ban, okay? And so no, it hasn't been done, right? Mm-hmm. And where we've run on abortion, the record from 22, from the memo leak on, okay, the record is incontrovertible. Every place we wedged abortion, we won in 2022. Yep. And with the exception of Adrian's race was protecting democracy and voting access, right? Because he was running for Secretary of State against an actual election, insurrection.
Yeah,
right?
like an actual.
But it's still the same message. And like, that's the message he took to the swing bucket in Maricopa. That's McCain Republicans as well, right? Like, he ran hard on this branding frame. So, like, yes, it's very, very, very hard to get people to understand you could run on abortion every single campaign. So, like, my goal is state legislature, the House races above those state legislature races up to the Senate and the governor's race, and then top down from Biden. If we all did that and ran a cacophony of threat to freedom, right? Like, we would be able to break through. But it really is, for any parents that are listening to this, it's very much like Horton Hears a Who from Dr. Seuss, which is a book. Maybe you've read it. And it's about an elephant that knows there's a world living on this little piece of fluff because he can hear it with his big ears, okay? But no one else believes him. And they're getting ready to destroy the world, these terrible monkeys that are after him. So he's telling the mayor of this little world, you have to make noise. Okay, we don't have Fox News. We don't have, every grifter online from MAGA has 1 million followers.
Yeah.
Folks, okay, like, our most popular accounts have 300,000. Okay, it's a huge difference. So we need everyone centralized, wedging Dobb, wedging threat to freedom. I mean, mostly what's happening with that Dobb and that abortion messaging is this. J.D. Vance ran in Ohio. All right. Tim Ryan ran the old strategy. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those Democrats. I'm going to run against both parties.
Yeah.
Vote for me. Right. And, million people that caucus with the Republicans, and they do it off a brand ID because, again, millions of people don't even know abortion's been is illegal now. Right. So for brand identification, and we see this in issue ownership polling all the time. When you ask voters who's good for the economy, they say Republicans. Now, they've destroyed the economy in 2008. They stood in the way of really good response until Biden got into office for COVID, right? Like, it is a demonstrable fact that actually Republicans are bad for the economy. If you were paying attention, you would know that, but you're not paying attention, right? Yep. So, like, there are millions of people that walked in and voted for the Republicans in the North Carolina Senate race, the Florida Senate race, the Ohio Senate race, and the Wisconsin Senate race, and they never once heard of this basic fact about the Republican. MAGA extremist coming for you. Okay? Like, no, I mean, there's probably a million people that cast a vote for JD Vance, and they have no idea
Not a
that he's a
clue.
fascist misogynist. Okay, no idea. And if you want people to know that about your opponent, then damn it, you're going to have to tell them, and that means you're going to have to devote 70-80% of your budget, where you're the only person that has paid ads. Okay, because nobody else has any money. The money goes to the campaigns. And we need the campaigns to be hammering MAGA extremism if we're going to survive this fall.
When I started out my on-air work, I was the black Democrat at Fox in 2017 till about 2019. So it was a special place to be.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah. I had never really spent a lot of time watching Fox, as I'm a Democrat, and I don't really, want to participate in just random shitty fake news.
Yeah.
It amazed me the just difference in coverage. You talked about like right-wing grifters and how they all have a million followers. I mean, there were people in that ecosystem who I had never heard of who were big deals, $1 million contracts, like going on speaking tours. And I was like, who the hell are you? It's an entirely different world. What is the power of that right-wing ecosystem? And why don't Democrats have anything similar?
Dude, it has us down. I mean, we are at 5.5 months. I am not kidding. 5.5 months from seeing people like Liz Cheney have to flee the country for their safety.
100%.
Okay? That's where we're at. Okay? So it is frustrating, that like the urgency has to be there, right? And the asymmetry problem is this. Like we don't have a homogenous party, right? Mm-hmm. We are heterogeneous. We're actually, in poli-sci speak, where there's a lot of asymmetry on how these two parties are organized. The Republican Party was a much more ideological movement. Now it's an ideological movement in a different way, but not traditional conservatism. Okay, now it's MAGA, right? And then the Democratic Party is kind of this coalition of various interest groups, and like you might be focused on women's rights, and then this other person's on climate and this union, and like that's why I said we're always focused on representing the coalition in our messaging instead of picking the one thing that can win us. And then you use the power to represent all the coalitions, right? Because if I win office wedging Roe, guess what? I can use that power to protect unions, to do climate change, to get gun action, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So we've put the cart before the horse, and we're never going to be able to build a Fox News. I mean, there have been attempts to build liberal media. I mean, to be clear, about 1 million people watch MSNBC out of 340 million Americans.
Yeah.
And that's so like if we had any appetite for like a quote unquote liberal network, it would be shown there. Okay. So here's where they're very smart. Number one, it's all billionaire financed. And if you haven't read the MAGA Diaries from Tina Nigan, you should definitely read that book. It's about her being basically groomed to be a fake journalist by Claremont Institute and Heritage Foundation and Turning Point so that she could go in and use her access to like help MAGA, right? And it was very illuminating even for me, even after I'd written the book and laid out this infrastructure asymmetry, because it just goes to show like they've got some billionaires. They send these kids to training camps, to summer camps, to events with pyrotechnics and
the stuff that Turning Point does is real deal. Charlie Kirk is the only person I've ever been in agreement with where I actually had to be physically separated from. Like, he is a special kind of asshole, a special kind of bad person.
He is a special kind of bad person. But he had asked me, his staff, because now you've done enough TV to know this. Sometimes people don't vet the guests very well, right? So Charlie Kirk Show reached out and asked me if I wanted to come on. I'm like, oh, you bet I asked.
Oh, you would eat his lunch.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do, and you can see it online, folks. I'm going to be very clear. What I was doing down there, I wanted to do the debate because I wanted to get a sense of the infrastructure of Turning Point, and I knew
which is
my
incredible
only way to get in it. And they brought me right in, and I'm telling you, 4 buildings with 4 stories on each building. The one I went in, and the only one I could access, was a state-of-the-art studio with college kids coming into the green room every 2 minutes back from flights, okay, airplane rides to wherever they were evangelizing MAGA fascism, right? And, there was a building, one of the four, that I didn't get to go in, but it had a sign on the outside that said Turning Point Logistics. 4 floors devoted to Turning Point Logistics, an $80 million annual budget, okay? And what do we have? We have 500 decentralized competing youth turnout organizations competing for basically beans, because that's how our side is financed, because we've told all the rich people we don't want their money, and that was probably a bad idea. We don't want money in politics, but we have it right now. Okay. And they have a shit ton of money. So stop telling people you don't want their money. We need more money, not less. Okay?
Right? Play by the rules. Like, if those are the rules of the game, let's go.
From motherfucking Satan himself at this point, if it is going to be used to beat Donald Trump and hold back fascism, right? So, we shoot ourselves. We need a summit if we survive this moment, because I've been very focused in the short term on what immediately can be done in these swing races to improve and maximize our probability of winning, right? But my long term is, okay, if we get the chance, even if because we won every battle up till now, but the war can be determined on battle final. And battle final is Donald Trump going back into the presidency and using that power through Project 2025, which they've already laid out how they're going to do it, and consolidate more power in the executive and really end federalism as we know it, guys. So we have to make sure that we are hitting that hard and making sure that the tuned out people of America, if we don't tell them there's an emergency going on, they're going to be focused on inflation and gas prices, okay? It is, very much the case that we have to set the terms of the stakes of the election.
We talked about how voters don't really kind of know what's going on. Do they understand the threat that Donald Trump poses in a second term? There's a lot of voters who either weren't alive or were tuned out for a lot of reasons, and I think have forgotten just how bad things were. How do we remind them of just how bad it was? Because it feels like it's been normalized.
It has been normalized. And here's the thing, today we're having a debate in the party. Should Biden, highlight the fact that his opponent's a convicted felon? That's not a debate the Republican Party would ever fucking have.
Never.
Okay? And they would have had the whole toolkit, paid media, everything ready to hum the moment that verdict came out. And they would have spent all weekend pounding and enhancing the earned media effects, not just hoping for earned media effects. Again, here's your problem with earned media strategy. No one watches the fucking media. No one's watching it. Okay? Nobody's watching it. There's more people watching a YouTube podcaster than watching CNN on a day-to-day basis, folks. And those are just the people that are interested. 80% of our country doesn't even do that. Okay? So we, it's our job then to inform them of the threat. And so if you're spending all your advertising about insulin at $35 in infrastructure, then that's $1 you're not spending informing the electorate of the threat. And it's absolutely going to come down to what that October narrative is. And, most people are not tuned in. One of the reasons people have been so freaked out about the polling, and again, it's going to be a toss-up. It's going to come down to 100,000 votes in 6 swing states. Yep. There's nothing I can do to relieve you of that basic reality. There will be no wholesale rejection of MAGA. There are millions of people in this country who have been radicalized, and they think we're the baddies, okay? And they want to kill us.
Legitimately want to kill us. Yeah.
They legit want to kill us, right? So that's where we are. Okay, and we're not going to be able to change it. So what we want to make sure we're doing is maximizing the probability and the strategy in every one of those swing races, on every one of those swing maps. And it's very important that Biden understand, if you want people to take the convicted felon resume of Donald Trump seriously, you must take it seriously, okay? And what's happening right now is what I talk about in the book. Republicans don't use a poll and say, oh, this is what people are kind of into. They do, right? But why are people into immigration right now? Because Fox News has done nothing but for 5 years.
Yeah.
But hammer immigration, okay? It's just every day, all day, right-wing media sphere, all day, every day. And, we can make people afraid for democracy, but we have to make it. They're not going to just stumble upon that watching The Bachelor. Unless we pay to put an ad on The Bachelor that tells women and men, because some men watch it, but mostly women, they're coming for your contraceptive control because they want to control you, right?
Yeah, like when I would be sitting in the green rooms, kind of like watching the coverage waiting to go on. It would be unnerving because every other segment is this immigrant is raping or killing your kid. This immigrant's going on a killing spree. These black people are robbing your neighbor and cities are burning down. And it was just this like horrific, really dark feeling. And then I'd look out the window into Midtown Manhattan and be like,
yeah,
it's a beautiful day outside. What are they talking about? And all the anchors live in New York, in DC, in the suburbs of McLean. Like, for all their talk about how horrible all these liberal places, every single one of them lives in these liberal places.
And likes it too.
Yeah.
And likes it too. Because they like all the amenities of liberalism. They never admit it. Right?
Yeah, like Yale, Harvard, Stanford, all the ivory tower institutions that they then shit on.
High-end restaurants and the elite life that they're
Diplomat.
I came from Grateful Dead tour. I promise you, there's nothing elitist about me, right? So, it's all bullshit. But here's the thing: is they understand the basic. They have no trouble accepting this thing that liberals are so like internally like resistant to, which is again, voters know nothing. Okay, voters know nothing. If you don't believe me, get out of your friend network because maybe your friends are just like you. So if your life is in New York City or Virginia or the Beltway or something like that, then yeah, what I'm saying may not sound reasonable, but I'm here to tell you, when a political event happens and you look at the Google search data, it all comes from New York and DC. Okay?
Absolutely.
It almost all comes from New York and DC. Outside of the Beltway, nobody knows what you know, and they will never know if we don't pay to tell them through our paid advertising strategies.
So when you look at a state like Michigan, it is, I think, the bellwether for the election. But the big warrior right now, obviously, is the Muslim community, given what is going on in Israel and Gaza, Palestine. I was in a cab yesterday, and it was about the third or fourth time in the last month that I was in New York, but I had heard someone of Muslim descent, someone who's Arab, say that they weren't going to vote for Biden because of what's going on. And I was in New York, I was in LA, like all over the country, and hearing this same theme. What are Democrats going to do in a state like Michigan, in a state like Georgia that has a high Muslim population that will be the deciding factor should they decide to stay home?
Yeah, I mean, number one, like the only place that really matters on Muslim population is Michigan because of the high cost. Maybe Minneapolis, maybe Minnesota as well. Okay, very high populations there. Number two about that population is 80% conservative, okay? So like your average Muslim is not voting for Democrats to begin with, many of them, okay? Because they are very religious conservatives, and some might even call them fans of theocracy, right? Some of them are fans of theocracy and would prefer a even if it's a Christian biblical approach, a much more strident approach on the culture wars, right? Banning gay marriage, things like that. So of the progressive or liberal element of the Muslim people, plus where that really becomes a problem and it broadens out from Michigan, is that it's not just people who are card-carrying Muslims, right? It is the young progressives, especially those that digest a lot of TikTok and were targeted on an intentional psychological operation through TikTok, financed by places like Iran to radicalize them on this issue, right? So now you have this disaffected problem. There's an element of that disaffection problem that there's nothing you could say to them. They're so high on propaganda. They're like MAGA on the reverse, okay? Yeah. So there's a chunk of them. But the next level up, your very paying attention 24-year-old is like, oh, I hear Biden sucks on Gaza. Like those people are the people that we need to be talking to. And what we need to be telling them and showing them is this is what's coming for you if Donald Trump wins.
Yeah.
And in terms of the Muslim community, let me be clear. I mean, Mehdi Hassan frustrates me because I know he understands democratic emergency and what's at stake this fall, but he keeps, telling Muslims not to vote for Joe Biden or not to vote. And so just today I'm like, dude, Matt, do you not believe this? Because I keep showing him direct from the Trump website. Okay, it's not something I created. It's not a meme I made. It's a meme the Trump campaign made that Stephen Miller, the architect of the Muslim ban and the
Yep.
child separation policy, retweeted because he was so excited about it, dude. And it's not about banning Muslims. It's about deporting them, finding everyone that's in Free Palestine, not just Muslims.
Yeah.
Everybody in those at one of these protests in Trump's world is getting rounded up, deported, having their immigration reversed, whatever it is. And it's right on his website. It's right in writing. Like, do you not believe that? So, like, to me, it is definitely imperative that we, again, you can't expect people to know that about Donald Trump. They don't know that. And they're certainly not getting served up that with their Iran-sponsored algorithms, okay? So we must tell young progressives, this is what's coming to your friends, okay? We've got to make it personal to them. You're not hurting Joe Biden, by the way, if you don't vote for Biden. Biden will be sad, plenty sad, guys. He's going to be plenty fucking sad for us because he can flee. He's going to get on an airplane and flee. Okay.
Yeah, he'll head over to the UK and be fine.
Yeah. So I think there is a collective bend in that progressive, person, right? There's more collectivism and empathy in a progressive than there is in a conservative, right? I think it really does come down to making sure they understand you're not hurting Joe Biden. You're hurting your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors. People are literally going to suffer because of this. And so I think that's the only way to go. As I was in a meeting yesterday and I told the guys, I'm like, listen, think of it this way. What would be easier to do with one of these disaffected Gaza voters? Convince them actually Joe Biden hasn't been that bad on Gaza, or convince them that Donald Trump will be worse?
Donald Trump.
Right. There you go. I mean, it's just a matter of psychologically, what's the easier lift?
Yeah.
And it's definitely B.
I mean, because we've seen it. We saw the Muslim ban. I was in New Jersey when the Muslim ban was put in place and was a new public defender in New York. And so there were a lot of people who were going to the airports. And I mean,
and now, if that happens next time when he wins, he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act and use it as a reason to declare martial law, folks. I mean, this is not a fucking drill.
It's on, and you talked about it being on the website. Project 2025 is on the website. It is not hidden. They are running on it. Can you talk for a second about Project 2025 and Stephen Miller and just how evil and insidious it is?
Yes, I'm really happy to. So, I was editing the book, the final copies of the book, and I mentioned, because I lay out this asymmetry problem that we have, and most of it's because they have 5 or 20 billionaires that have invested and built all this different infrastructure for 30 years, right? And, I mentioned the Heritage Foundation's manual for leadership in, how it got implemented into the Reagan administration is the manual that brought us Reaganomics and the entire Reagan revolution, okay? And so I reread the line and I'm like, ooh, I wonder if these crazy motherfuckers have actually put this fascist autocracy shit, the Steve Bannon world, into the manual for leadership. So I ordered a copy of it, okay? and
so you're on their mailing list now.
For free. Free. A book that's this thick. It's 1,000 pages for free because that's how much money they have. They sent it to me. Okay, so for free. So I open up the book and start reading, and holy shit! I mean, it is from page 1. This is how we're going to collapse the separation of powers system. When the courts get outraged, that's okay because there's no enforcement mechanism for the courts, so we can ignore the courts. Yep. It is a manual. It's a transition manual to autocracy, folks, and it's all in writing by the biggest names in the Republican world, not just MAGA, not original MAGA people. We're talking every Republican that's still involved in the Republican Party.
And the Peter Thiels of the world and these really evil...
detailed directions, it's not some move on memo, okay? That's never going to even make it into the door at the White House. It is an actual transition guide that will go in with Trump and any Republican, but Trump especially, and is going to start getting executed day 1. So if you don't believe me, please just Google Project 2025 PDF, because there's a PDF version that you can pull up and you can read it yourself, and you will understand then why I am so strident about the strategic shift we have to make because we needed to make it 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And now we are at the final countdown. There will be no do-over. So we have to do it right this time.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that Project 2025 include are the rounding up of 30 million undocumented immigrants and putting them into created pens, basically. Converting things like RFK Stadium in DC into a holding cell and putting undocumented immigrants into them. It's making people register their pregnancies so that then it can be tracked. It's firing and the dismantling of the federal government of millions of federal workers.
Going in, they have a database, by the way, that they have advertised, and it's still there, where you go in as a young Republican and you apply to be in this queue. So when they come in, they're going to do an executive order and they're going to basically fire all the merit civil service employees who won't swear a loyalty oath to Donald Trump. Okay, it's very Nazi-esque. Okay?
Yep.
And then they have a data bank. And if you want to get in the data bank, there's questions they want to know, and they're litmus test questions. Right now, if you want to work at the RNC under Lara Trump, this is also the test you have to pass. And the very first question is, did Donald Trump win the election in 2020? And your only right answer is yes, okay? Because they don't want anybody in. And, I'm telling you now, it's not going to be a Nikki Haley vice president, okay? Donald Trump has one thing that he's looking for in his next vice, and it is somebody who will ignore when he starts to collapse the constitutional republic. He is not going to have another sincere conservative who actually believes in the Constitution get in his way like Mike Pence did, okay? Because as crazy and ideological as Mike Pence is, he was still a constitutionalist. That will not happen again. So our only hope is to save ourselves. And, again, the price is going to be massive. Think about the dreamers, will you? I mean, here we tell the dreamers, sign up on this list and get into the system so that, you have this quasi-legal status. These are people, some of these kids have
come out from the shadows was the famous line.
Never been to Venezuela, right? They have never known anything but America, and they're age 16 or 18 now or whatever it is, right? Well, now Trump's got a whole data bank to go raw. You guys, they're not going to let the dreamers stay, okay? So if you're in a state, especially a state with a Latino population like Texas, Florida, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, right? You should be pounding this hard. I mean, you can't round up 30 million people. Nazi Germany learned this, okay?
Yeah.
There's a logistic problem, okay? You can't deport 30 million people, or
Where
even
do you send
11.
them?
Let's just say 11 million, okay? Or even 5 million. Where do you send them? There's no humanitarian way to execute that. That is why, even though Ronald Reagan wasn't a fan of illegal immigrants, he just naturalized them all, because there is no humanitarian roundup. And when we get to the day where Donald Trump starts rounding up Latinos, there will not be a person that didn't vote for Joe Biden with a good heart who is not going to be filled with regret watching these people scream, watching them struggle through the streets with their belongings into RFK Stadium. Come on, guys. Right? And it's right on the website. So, to me, again, it's not about, telling these communities what to think. What I'm telling you is these communities are no different. We're all focused on differentiation on our side. It's all identity politics, okay? Well, there's no difference. Latinos don't watch the news. Black voters don't watch the news. Gay voters don't watch the news. Women don't watch the news. I could go on and on. So if we want Latinos, American Latinos, to understand that they're going to be forced to prove who they are. They're coming for birthright citizenship. So if you're a first generation citizen and your parents were illegal, don't get comfortable.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump is very clear that he might revoke retroactively that. And then, someone will say, well, that's unconstitutional. And I'm like, yeah, all you
do something about it.
Suspend the Constitution, dude. To suspend the Constitution, I mean, I've studied the rise of totalitarians, but especially the Nazis intensively for 3 years. There's only two things you need, guys, to collapse a government. It doesn't matter if it's a new government or an old one. It's the same thing. You need a person willing to do it and a supporting cast willing to let him get away with it. Donald Trump has both, okay? Like everyone that's advocating for Donald Trump right now, they know what they're advocating for. They understand that. That's why they're all willing to say the trial was a sham and it was a witch hunt. And, even supposedly serious people like, Mitch McConnell, right? They know that that's it. And now they're just trying to protect themselves because they don't want to be purged after they're done with us. Okay?
Yeah, and that's kind of my big thing, because you're watching people humiliate themselves and say things that they know aren't true,
Right.
all for, pecuniary gain, or all for access. But it also does feel like we're headed into this Nazi-esque unraveling. Is it hyperbolic to draw those parallels between,
No,
Hitler's second after he came out of prison and his rise to what's going on potentially
Here,
now?
let me tell you, I started my study of totalitarianism a little over 3 years now, and I started pretty big macro. I wanted to understand all these 20th century totalitarian movements from the left and the right. How did they all happen? Blah, 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 blah. And then I started to look specifically in Germany. And I'll tell you what I wanted to learn from that was that I wanted to see that it can't happen, that actually there's a big difference, that obviously clearly this can't happen, blah, blah, blah. It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite, guys. Like we are already
Perfectly
in a
made.
pot that is boiling. It's almost hit boil. We don't even know it because it's been incrementally increased on us, right? So it is not hyperbolic because, again, Donald Trump on his website, right on his website, Agenda 47, go read it. Go Donald Trump campaign, Agenda 47, in his own words, talks about seizing control of the Department of Education, eliminating it, okay? Eliminating the Department of Education. Now, why? It's not because they think schools should have local control, guys. It's because the federal government requires certain behaviors out of school districts to get federal funding in terms of, equality and diversity and all these other things. That's what they're coming for, okay? They want to control the schools and he's very clear, and he's going to change the curriculum of the schools so it's all pro-America. Now, that's not pro-America how you and I hear it. It's MAGA America, guys. So, like, this, it's clearly not. And then, I will say one more thing. Like, I got a lot of shit back in 2020. Through the summer, they started flying around the country. The Ronna McDaniel, Trump, Bill Barr, the AG, visiting Michigan, Pennsylvania, all these things. The state legislators like, okay, well, what can we do? Well, let's pass legislation at least that make it so you can't count the mail-in ballots, because they first tried to just make it so you couldn't vote by mail in the pandemic, right? But when that all failed, they're like, okay, you can't count the mail-in ballots till nighttime because they were hoping a really close election. Right? This is their original plan. It's going to be very razor close, and then they can shit on mail-in ballots and kind of weed away, right?
Yeah.
Well, it ends up being too big of a margin for them to make the argument of fraud, right? It's too big, but they still go forward with the argument, okay? And it was very clear to me, starting in July, they are not going to transition power peacefully because either they're going to win and have it, or they're going to lose and they're not going to leave office peacefully. And I got poo-pooed. Oh, that can never happen. Roe will never get repealed. At some point, you have to understand the common thread, and this is kind of tying all this thread together here. When I studied all these regimes, right? Here's the common thread. Humans are designed evolutionarily to have a strong bias optimism. Okay? Very strong. So like I'm not saying you, Michael, but generally, your opinion that, it can't happen here, or this can't get that bad, or there's checks and balances, that's not like an interesting take. That's the expected hot take to have in this situation. Collapse societies one after the other. That was the collective wisdom. Okay. So there's nothing like unique or like edgy about it. Here's how strong optimism bias is. Okay. So in Germany, we have a 0.7% of the population of Germany is Jewish, by the way. Okay. What Adolf Hitler does is he defines every ail that German people are facing as a product of the Jews who are communists. Communists and Jews hand in hand, and all the Jews are just control everything and 0.7% of the population. Okay, so here's what I learned. I started off with like all the macro stuff, and I've read a million diary accounts from Jews, from soldiers, from leaders, from whatever. Right?
Yeah.
I've read diaries from Jews. in the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland, okay, because they invade Poland and they come after the 3 million Jews there with a vengeance, okay? And the first thing they did was they made their business, they took their businesses away. It's called Aryanization. So they took their business away and gave it to a Gentile. Then they took their apartments away. You know, many of these guys were very wealthy, took their apartments away, herded them into a ghetto. Then they made them build a wall around the ghetto to jail themselves in. They made them not only build the wall, they made them pay for it, okay? The Nazis made the Jews do this, okay? Then the wall is built, and now you have a ghetto, and you were talking about like an over concentration of population that's extreme, like 6, 7 families in an apartment, extreme, okay? And now you don't have access to food because you're walled in. So people are dying. And there is children, people, old people. You're walking across children's corpses to go to your job in the Warsaw Ghetto. And you start hearing rumors. Oh, now they're deporting people east, and we're pretty sure that what that means is you're killed. You're deported somewhere and murdered, okay? And still, in their diaries, optimism bias. Still, okay? So it's not a shock to me that people are resistant. What we have to do is something that no one's ever done before. We have to panic while there's time to fix it, because by the time it is obvious that you need to panic, it is too late.
Even if we survive this election and Trump isn't elected, though, I mean, there is a whole nother round of more disciplined, more, I think, fascist leaders. Among them, like you talked about J.D. Vance, you got the Tom Cottons of the world, the Josh Hawleys. What do we do even if we survive Trump? I mean, the next group that's coming behind is just as dangerous, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more dangerous, though, than any one of those individuals with the powers of the White House, especially in this country where we apparently lionize the presidency to the point where we think it's unusual to charge them for blatant criminal activity. Okay. Yeah. So like that, you know, but here's the thing. Again, I deal in data. I deal in lead. I'm not a hopium person. I'm not a doom person. I'm just a realist here to tell you what's really going to happen. Either we lose and we collapse into a fascist theocracy, the likes of which the world has never seen, and we hand by far the world's biggest military apparatus over to a bunch of authoritarians who probably will reintroduce colonialization, okay? Yeah. It's going to be a shit show. But if we win, it's still not going to be great, guys. We might see a secession movement from these southern states. We've opened this podcast kind of talking about realignment. You know, MAGA loves to hit this shit on Twitter. Oh, it's the Democrats that did segregation. The Democrats that did slavery. Well, it's white conservatives. Yeah. And the white conservatives are the base of the Republican Party right now, right? And I am not certain that we won't see states try to succeed. And the way that the Civil War started is very similar to that because, you know, Lincoln, he wasn't even inaugurated as the beginning of the secession process begins. He is, he understands, like, I am taking an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and that requires to hold the Union. So really, like, the response of the North is initially about preventing disunion so that Lincoln is obeying his oath of the take care clause of the Constitution, right? And they don't let the Southern states succeed. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going to happen. That's why I'm telling you guys, though, whatever happens from Trump losing, it will not compare in severity, whatever it is. I mean, even if there's violence and death, it will not compare to what will happen to everybody if he wins.
What role do you think TikTok and social media in general is going to play in these last 5 months?
I mean, obviously we need to be on TikTok, right? And you can see the power of TikTok because I've talked about how it's been used to radicalize American progressives into some pretty scary shit. I mean, a lot of it is very anti-Semitic. It's based on the flawed idea that somehow, like, you know, the Jews just showed up and were like, hey, we want to live here. Like, it's not their ancestral homeland. Right? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so crazy, but it also shows you with the right money and influence and the right social media strategy, you can shape a lot of public opinion. And we know MAGA is going to be doing it, folks. So the question is, what are we going to do? And I was absolutely shocked. You know, I'm like, what do you mean? You're not going to get on TikTok? Because Chinese. Oh, are you fucking kidding me? And here's the thing: like, you work in as a consultant, as a strategist, and there's probably people that listen to this that do. So you know how hard it is to get an ad into the eyeball of somebody.
Yeah.
The youth vote has always been a huge issue because they don't watch TV. They're busy. They're going to parties. They're having fun. And now we have a tool that's we've never had before. We can beam right into young people's brains, and then we're not going to use it, dude. And we're not going to use it, right? So, like, my life goal, is to have a massive digital infrastructure in place that is pushing hard, our brand up, their brand down. Because again, we're in a situation, and you've pointed it out, this is a wildfire that we face in November. It threatens to burn the whole city down and take us all with it. But it is part of a climate change problem, okay? And that climate change problem is the Hawleys and the Cruzes and the embedded MAGA extremism, right? We have to be already thinking about day next, right? And what we're going to do to contain that radicalism. And the only way we can do that is we have to fix the biggest problem in American politics, which is that we have cultured people to not only not like politics, but to feel morally superior by not engaging in the system, okay?
Yeah.
And that's going to take generational work to do. I have some ideas of how to do that, but social media is going to play a very big role in it.
As we close out, what final advice do you give to not just Biden world, but like the down ticket races as we head into the election?
Yeah, again, it's about maximizing the probability of winning. Read the book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts. The reason Jamie Harrison and Ken Martin, who's the Association of State Democratic Committee president, bought 3 copies of this book for every state party committee, okay? And are running around telling everyone to read it is because they understand how important it is that every campaign with a paid budget, a budget to do paid advertising, maximizes their message and is running against MAGA extremism. If you aren't doing that, we're gonna lose. You're gonna lose, but we're gonna lose because your loss is our loss in this country right now. So my great wish is that we, wherever there are swing races, we are layering them up and we're wedging MAGA extremism, especially on the issue of Dobbs, because there are many people who don't yet know what and I guarantee you swing voters are going to be like, wait a minute, they're life fighting women out of Idaho to Oregon because they can't get medical care? Like that, you know what I mean? So it's in every state. Florida has their ban now. Texas has theirs. There's a woman there that has been medically tortured by the Republican Party of the state. Okay, it's not about the big numbers. People don't absorb statistics. Find Kate Cox. Find your Kate Cox. Find the woman that was had to be life flighted out of Idaho. Put her in an ad. Make it, a personal testimonial. That's what Republicans do so effectively in their ads, and we just get caught up on we want to be there's no fucking accuracy award. Okay, you don't go to the pollies and get an award for the most accurate campaign. Okay, there's no accuracy award. People don't understand. I know how Social Security works, okay? I understand that when I say Republicans are going to steal your Social Security, that technically that's not true, not because they aren't going to steal it. They are going to steal it, but because technically you're paying in for the previous generations and people who aren't, they're going to be paying for us. I get that. People don't get it, dude. Don't worry about it. Just tell them Donald Trump is going to steal your Social Security. Okay, 5th grade level shit, meet the electorate where it is.
Rachel Bitecofer, author of Hit 'em Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. Everyone needs to go out. This is essential reading, especially right now. Go to your nearest, small bookstore or Amazon or wherever. Go pick up the book. It's an amazing read. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was a great conversation, Michael. Thanks for having me.
This was such a great conversation, and we would love to have you back again for the election.
Yeah, let's do it, dude.
Let's do it. Thanks for being with me today. Share this episode with others, like and review it, and please keep learning all you can so that you can make an informed voting decision this year. Come back next week for more Truth in Politics. I'm Michael Starr Hopkins, and this is It Matters.